All right, so let's get into the enrollment plan recommendations. Before we talk about the specific recommendations for this region, I just want to give you a quick overview of the impact across the county. And so what you're seeing here is a basic map that shows you with these sort of color splotches, the various areas that are potentially impacted as written in the current draft. So again, it's still a proposal at this point in time. We'll be bringing a second draft to the board in October. After some more review of that second draft, then we'll bring a final draft to the board in November. So there's still some time for some minor tweaks, but we're feeling fairly confident that these are helpful recommendations that will address issues that we've mentioned before, such as crowding, transportation efficiency, and taking advantage of schools that have available capacity. The way to look at this is just a quick geographic distribution, and what you see here on the list on the left is a list of elementary schools that potentially will be sending students to a different school, and then the schools on the right would be schools that are potentially receiving students during these base recommendation changes. The base attendance areas for the middle school are being shown here, so the impacts are a little bit less spread out, but you'll see a couple of areas that are being impacted by recommendations at the middle school level. And again, these are base assignment recommended changes. And here at the high school level. And of course, this is the area we'll talk about in more detail tonight because it specifically is in this region. Before we get started on talking about the specific recommendations for the southwestern and western areas of the county, we do want to open with the stability rules. Recognizing that for this particular assignment plan, there aren't any new schools opening, and recognizing feedback received from the thought exchange in June about the importance of stability for families, we are recommending very generous stability rules. We also need to note that these are specific to this particular assignment plan. We cannot guarantee that these types of stability rules could be offered in future assignment plans. Again, at that point, we might be opening new schools. But in this case, we're feeling confident that these stability rules that are a little bit more generous than typical stability rules will be helpful. So for context, our current policy says that at the high school level, if a recommendation is made to go from one high school to another existing high school, that rising 10th, 11th, and 12th graders would be given the ability to stay at their current school without transportation. What we're adding and recommending in these more generous stability rules is that in addition to that, any rising 9th grade siblings of those students who might be staying at that original high school would also be allowed to join their older sibling. The second piece is at the elementary and middle school level. Traditionally, at the elementary and middle school level, it's a little more conservative in that it's usually the rising 5th and 8th grade students that are allowed to remain at their current school. We're recommending that all existing students, if they would like to stay and can provide their own transportation, be allowed to remain at their current school. And then again, that same generous offer for the 9th grade would be offered to the kindergarten and 6th grade students. So in short, we're recommending that any existing student in the district who's already attending one of the schools impacted be given the opportunity and to request that stability transfer and that it be approved. If the family doesn't want the stability transfer, they certainly are welcome to go to the new school assignment with the transportation. But we wanted to make sure that families knew that that would be essentially a guarantee. And I hate using that word, but in this case, that's how it would work. Separately, just as a friendly reminder, once a transfer is approved, it is valid through the final grade, or sometimes we use the term terminal grade of that particular school. So at the high school level, if you put in your transfer request for your rising 10th grader and that's all set and good to go for next year, that would continue on through the 12th grade. You wouldn't have to reapply each year. Similarly, at the elementary and middle school level, if you have a rising second grader that you'd like to stay at their existing school and you put in the stability request, and that'll get approved, and then that'll stick through the end of the 5th grade for that student. So that means if you decide to leave the current area and move, let's say, over to the other side of the county, Wake Forest, Zebulon, Wendell, something like that, and you'd prefer to go to the school for that area, you would actually need to request a transfer to be able to go to that new base. So it's a really solid, strong transfer. So we wanted to share that because we had a lot of questions about that, particularly at the high school level. And we wanted to make sure everybody understood that not only does core policy go along with that for those 10th, 11th, and 12th graders, but that additional piece of the rising 9th grade sibling being able to join is also being recommended for this specific assignment plan. All right, so let's get into the maps. In this area, we'll start at the elementary school level. The map that you're seeing here represents the base attendance areas for Adams Elementary School and Dillard Drive Elementary School. The sort of Tan brownish colored areas represent the existing base attendance area for Adams Elementary, and the blue area represents the existing base attendance area for Dillard Drive Elementary School. The recommendation is to take this portion, which is between the sort of South Hills shopping area as well as the new Epic Games location, the neighborhoods between those 2 points, and assign them from Dillard Drive Elementary to Adams Elementary. For perspective, this little red triangle that you might not see too clearly represents the physical location of Adams Elementary. So obviously this recommendation is being made based on proximity to the school as well as available capacity. Dillard Drive Elementary is experiencing significant crowding this year, and as one of our magnet schools, we need to make sure that we relieve that crowding so that we can maintain both goals. So based on proximity and facility utilization, those are the 2 core reasons why this recommendation is being made. So the resulting map, if approved, would look more like this, with the upper area being the Adams Elementary base attendance area and the blue area remaining as the Dillard Drive Elementary base attendance area. On this slide, you'll see capacity information related to projected crowding. So the way to read this is that the top table is what happens if we don't make any changes. So if we don't make any changes, Adams Elementary will continue to be underutilized, only having a 73 or 76% fill rate over the next couple of years. Dillard Drive Elementary, however, is going to maintain 105 to 100% attendance rate over the next couple of years, which we need to be able to relieve. The bottom set of tables shows you what happens if the plan is approved and every single student moves on the first year. So we know that this is a bit much. We don't think that Adams will jump to 91% and that Dillard will decline to 84% in the first year because of those generous stability rules. It allows this to happen more gradually. In addition, any available seats that become open at Dillard Drive Elementary can be there to absorb any growth in their base as well as to support the magnet program at the school. We have a note here. There is one more recommendation related specifically to Dillard Drive Elementary. It's much less impactful, but it's also included in this final result here that you see. Again, as we go along, if you have any questions now that we're specifically looking at maps, please post those to the thought exchange or to the chat so that we can make sure we address those once I get through the basic information. Here we see another set of elementary schools. The purple attendance area represents the existing base attendance area for Combs Elementary, and the green represents a portion of the Swift Creek Elementary base attendance area. As you can see on this map, there's a portion of the Combs Elementary base that's down here below the belt line. So this yellow line represents the belt line, and this represents that sort of 1 in 64 area where it merges with the 440 over here, 40 and 440. So this portion of the attendance area is a continuous part of the neighborhood that is right here that's already assigned to Swift Creek Elementary. So based on transportation efficiency, we're recommending that this attendance area be assigned to Swift Creek Elementary so that the resulting map would have this portion assigned to Swift Creek and leave this portion at Combs. You'll notice this little piece right here. We're going to talk about that next. So the impact, as you can see, is not terribly significant from a crowding perspective. So again, this recommendation is being made mostly based on transportation efficiency as well as continuity for those neighborhoods to be able to go to the same school. This is that portion that you saw on the other map. It's that same attendance area. It's currently a part of the Swift Creek attendance area. However, it's right next to and a part or kind of nestled inside of a portion of the Dillard Drive Elementary attendance area. And so we do recommend taking this attendance area and attaching it to the Dillard Drive piece again for that continuity of community as well as for transportation efficiency. So the resulting map would add this portion to the existing attendance area for Dillard Drive and take it out of the Swift Creek Elementary base attendance area. Again, this particular recommendation won't have a significant impact. The numbers that you're seeing for Dillard Drive are largely based on the previous move that we discussed going into Adams Elementary. So at this point, this particular recommendation, again, is being made based on transportation efficiency and that community continuity piece. And what you're seeing here is what I call a complementary move. As we recommend those changes at the elementary level, we want to align the feeder patterns at the middle school level as well. So the recommendation is that this portion that was previously at Swift Creek Elementary, which meant it was at Dillard Drive Middle, be attached to this portion of the Centennial Middle School base attendance area, and that this portion that was previously attached to the Centennial Middle School attendance area be included in the Diller Drive Middle attendance area. So it's a bit of an even swap. And again, this recommendation is being made based on transportation efficiency, as well as that community continuity piece. And of course, to align the feeder pattern for these neighborhoods. And as you can see, it doesn't have a significant impact on either school. And so we feel like it's a sustainable move. And then the final major recommendation in this area represents impacts on Apex Friendship High School, Apex High School, Green Hope High School, and Cary High School. For context, what's not displayed on this map is in this general area where my cursor is moving around is the future site of the Felton Grove High School that I mentioned earlier in the capital improvement updates. With Felton Grove High School being constructed in this location, there's a high likelihood that this portion of the Apex Friendship and Apex High School base attendance areas would be impacted by the opening of that school in just 2 short years. So we are not making any recommendations related to the attendance areas below US 1 because we're recognizing that they will most likely be impacted in 2 years when Felton Grove is opening up. So for orientation purposes, this black line represents US 1. This black line represents US 64. This sort of curvy line represents the 540, and you can sort of see 55 kind of nestled in there right next to or parallel to 540. The purple region represents the current base attendance area for Apex Friendship High School. The green area represents the current base attendance area for Apex High School, or a portion of it. There is a portion that you can see is kind of falling off screen here. The yellow represents a portion of the Cary High School base attendance area, and this more light blue color represents the Green Hope High School base attendance area, the current Green Hope High School base attendance area. One more piece of information, you recall that I mentioned with the capital improvement piece that there's an unnamed school coming in the Morrisville area. And so that'll generally be up in this northern portion of the western edge of the county. And so keeping in mind that that particular school will most likely impact the existing base attendance areas for Cary High School, Green Hope High School, and Panther Creek High School, there is some forward thinking about that in terms of the impacts on those schools in terms of loss of student population over time. And so what that means is recognizing the capped situation at Apex Friendship High School and the continued development, as we get closer over here to the western edge of the county, that's continuing to generate new students as new families move into the area. Relief is needed for this campus. It's already capping students out to Apex High School. However, Apex High School is also experiencing growth in its base attendance area while receiving those overflow students. And so it's at its capacity limit as well. And so rather than trying to have a cap at Apex Friendship and a cap at Apex High School, the recommendation is to go ahead and proceed with moves that would go along with the opening of Felton Grove in the future, but go ahead and get them started early so that we can get those moves in place. And then once Felton Grove opens up, we can come back and look at this area and talk about the final impact of that particular school. So the recommendations are to take this area highlighted in the sort of northern edge of the existing Apex High School base attendance area and assign it to Green Hope High School. This does represent some portions of the Turner Creek Elementary base attendance area, the Salem Elementary base attendance area, and a portion of the Laurel Park attendance area, all of which go to Salem Middle. And so we think from a feeder pattern perspective, as well as from a capacity and facility utilization perspective, assigning these areas to Green Hope High School would be sustainable over time and provide relief to Apex High School. In addition, there's an area over here on the eastern edge of the attendance area that's adjacent to the existing Cary High School attendance area that their current assignment is Briar Cliff Elementary and East Cary Middle School. And so this would align that feeder pattern into Cary High School. We recognize that nobody wants to be reassigned, and we understand that very, very clearly. The recommendations here, however, will allow for some space to open up at Apex High School so that it can continue to take some of the overflow students from Apex Friendship in the short term, as well as go ahead and expand its base attendance area a little bit further west to provide some more long-term relief to Apex Friendship High School over time. And so this area that you see highlighted represents an existing attendance area assigned to Apex Friendship High School that we are recommending to go ahead and move into Apex High School in the coming school year. Again, with those generous stability rules, any existing students that would like to remain at the school and have an ability to get to the school on their own, transportation, provided by the family, then they're welcome to stay, and those stability transfers would be approved. In addition, any rising ninth grade students of those existing older students would be allowed to join their siblings as a school as a transfer student as well. The only downside, of course, is that the district level transportation would be no longer provided for those students. So what you can see here is that the recommended resulting map would be that this larger expanded area would represent the Green Hope High School base attendance area. The larger expanded area would represent the Cary High School. The slightly diminished portion of Apex High School would be sort of retrofitted here with this piece. And I did see some comments about, well, if you take one out and you put one in, have you made a difference? And the short answer is, of course, we would not have. So that's not what you're going to see here. So let me go ahead and show you the impact on the facility utilization side. The recommendations are taking more students out of Apex High School than we're bringing in from Apex Friendship, so that there is that ability to provide some relief to Apex High School while also providing a little bit of relief to Apex Friendship High School, and still allow Apex High School to serve as the overflow school for any additional new families that move into the Apex Friendship base that are beyond the cap value. So the current capacities for each of the schools are listed here. What you're seeing here in the left column is what the projected capacity would look like, or the projected utilization would look like next year if we did not make any changes. And at this point, that 119% at Apex Friendship is unsustainable, as well as the 113% at Apex High School. Those of you who have students attending the schools can vouch for what happens when those schools are that crowded. With the recommended changes, again, this is if all students move, but again, if only the ninth graders move, that's a huge difference for us, as well as any new residents that move into those areas. They would also be assigned to the different base school. You can see that that balances out the enrollment much better going into the 23-24 school year, and allows us to have that time that we need to make it to 25-26 when Felton Grove is scheduled to open up, and then we can continue to address the growth in this area with that school site. So I know that was a very long explanation, but I know there's so many moving parts with this particular recommendation. I wanted to be as clear as possible as to our reasoning. So again, this portion, this is just going to look at them one at a time. So this portion is that eastern edge that we're recommending join Cary High School. It's being recommended from a facility utilization standpoint, knowing that Cary has the available capacity for the students, as well as to align the feeder patterns for that elementary, middle, and high school level. So Briarcliff to East Cary to Cary High School. These recommendations up here on the northern edge of the Apex High School attendance area being recommended to move into Green Hope, again, are being made specifically based on facility utilization. Green Hope has available capacity to support these students over the long term. And there is some feeder pattern alignment here as well with Laurel Park, Salem Elementary, Turner Creek Elementary, and Salem Middle in particular. There's a strong cohort of students from Salem Middle that go to Green Hope High. And so that's a portion of why this recommendation is being made. And then finally, the portion here, they're currently at Scotts Ridge Elementary and Apex Middle. And so just that's a little bit of a feeder pattern, and of course the facility utilization move as well. We are cognizant that I can't say that all of these are proximity based moves, in the sense that it's possible that maybe Apex High School or Apex Friendship High School is a little bit closer to some of these neighborhoods than the school that they're being assigned to. And that's why we've tried to be as clear as we can that the major motivation behind these recommendations is specifically facility utilization, and then also taking into account feeder patterns to balance that out, to sort of address the concept that we saw in the thought exchange about community. And so that is all of the base attendance area recommendations for this area. And I know it's a doozy at the high school level. I don't want to minimize that. There's quite a few students and addresses impacted by these recommendations, which is again why we really wanted to have those generous stability rules for this year to allow families to have as much stability as possible. We certainly can't continue to offer district transportation in all of those situations, but if the families have a set carpool system or have another way of getting to and from school, then we certainly would support and completely approve all of those transfers. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how that process will work as well. The next set of recommendations that were presented to the board were related to calendar application changes. And so at this point, what we're talking about is when you look online during the magnet year-round application period, or even during maybe the transfer period, you'll sometimes notice that if you're assigned, particularly at the elementary and middle school level, to a traditional calendar school, there's most likely a year-round calendar school of some sort that's offered up as an application school that comes with district transportation. As you can imagine, with our current situation with transportation and the challenges that we're facing, in some of these cases, it's just no longer feasible for us to continue to offer transportation to those alternate choices. So what you're seeing here is a mixed bag of recommendations. One sort of element, if you look at, let's say, the Valentine example here, Valentine Elementary is a multi-track year-round school. Currently, families in this base attendance area might see both Fuquay-Varina Elementary and Lincoln Heights Elementary as a traditional option. It's a carryover from a previous assignment plan. As you can imagine, that creates very inefficient transportation routes for our transportation department if they have to come into the same neighborhood to take students to two different traditional schools. So in some of these situations, we're not saying take the transportation away, but we're saying just let's reduce it to a single school so we can increase the efficiency for those routes. In some cases, you're seeing an NA. And so what that means is that it's not that the families can no longer ask for these schools or ask for these particular calendars. It's more that the district will no longer be able to provide transportation once approved. So during the transfer period, if a family asks for a particular different school based on calendar because of hardship or calendar alignment for their family, we'll do everything we can to try to approve those within policy and capacity rules and all those things that we have to take into consideration. However, if and when we can approve those transfers, district transportation would no longer be provided. And in some other areas, as you can see with the Bryan Road and Carpenter examples, it's quite possible that there's several school choices. And in this case, we're not necessarily saying, let's remove all of them. We're saying, let's be really strategic and think about them geographically. So either Rand or Timber Drive would show up as an option. If you don't know Bryan Road, it's in the Garner area and it has a relatively lengthy attendance area. And so the idea would be that the northern portion could go to its most proximate year-round school and the southern portion could go to a slightly different year-round school. And that way, at least those transportation routes would be a little bit more efficient. We're continuing to evaluate these. You'll notice I made a oopsie. Hilburn Drive is listed at the bottom of this list and again at the top of the other. So there's not an additional move there. That was just an accidental duplication. But on this screen, you can see additional elementary school-based attendance areas that are impacted by these types of recommendations. The entire presentation is posted in the board materials as well as linked in our district website. So if you do want to come back to any of these, you can always look at that. And of course, the recording will be posted sometime tomorrow so that if you wanted to come back and sort of fast forward to this portion, you could look at these lists again. And then this is a third page of recommendations at the elementary school level, again, specific to the calendar application recommendations. And then one final slide related to calendar application recommendations as it applies to middle and high school students. All right, and we've talked about the stability rules, and I keep saying them over and over again because it really was our number one question. It was the question that came up the most in the thought exchange and has come up the most in the previous virtual information sessions. So to clarify one last time, the stability rules that are being recommended is that any existing students that are already attending one of the schools being recommended for change, so we can use Apex High School as an example. If you're in an attendance area that's being recommended to be assigned from Apex High School, let's say to Green Hope High School, and you want to stay at Apex High School, post November 15th, we will specifically send out emails to those families that are impacted with a dedicated link that says, go in here right now, tell us this is what you want, and we will get that approved for you before we even get too much further into the school year, so you can have that taken care of and have that sense of peace that that stability transfer has been approved. In addition, if you have a rising ninth grade student that you wanted to join that older student at Apex High School, we'll be able to put that request in at that same time. So you can get your whole family situation taken care of before we get into the more traditional transfer periods. So what we're going to do is send an email out to any families that are still included as impact areas once we come up with draft 2. So we have this last information session tonight. We have the thought exchange running through tomorrow, and then we'll start to really synthesize. We've been, of course, looking at the data all along, but we'll really come down with some specific takeaways from all of the feedback that we've received. We'll make some final edits to the draft, and we'll prepare draft 2. Once draft 2 is shared with the board on October 18th, we will start contacting any family that's impacted by the recommendations that are in that second draft to give them a very specific targeted heads up. Hey, if you didn't notice before, you are included in the recommendations for the plan, and here's what's happening, and here's the stability rules we're recommending, and here's the basic framework for how you're going to be able to ask for that stability transfer. Please know that these are not conditional. No one has to review them per se. It's just a matter of if you're at this school and you're impacted and you're putting in the request, we can approve it. So there's no, I think I saw some terms like waiver and things like that. Those don't apply in this situation because they're rules that are initiated in policy and then approved with the plan. It's essentially guaranteed as long as you ask for it in the right time frame. So again, once we post draft 2, we'll start reaching out to families directly to give them a little bit more specific information on how the process will work, keeping in mind that the draft isn't final or isn't an official approved plan until the board actually takes vote on it, and that's not going to be scheduled. I've just heard word that it'll be November 16th. So in November, at the second board meeting of that month, we will take it to the board for final approval, and at that point, once it's an approved plan, then we will have very specific email communications going out to actually impacted families to give them all of the information that they need about the change that's happened to their address and for their student, as well as how to go about the process of requesting that stability transfer. My goal is to try to get those stability transfers taken care of before we leave for the winter break. That way you can have that assured sense of calm that that's taken care of, that's off your plate. We are working with our team because we are onboarding a new technology tool for this process. So I'm hesitant to give you a specific date when it will launch, but that will come with that email that we send out in November. And before we go to questions, and again, just as a reminder, if you have questions that have come up during the session, please continue posting those to our thought exchange using hashtag session4, or use the thought or the chat tool within the WebEx, and we'll make sure we address all of those questions tonight. So here's where we are. I've mentioned it a couple of times. We're refining our draft. We're taking in the final bit of public feedback that we're receiving. And then on October 18th, we'll present draft 2 to the board. After we present the board with draft 2, we'll open up a new thought exchange so that if there's any changes to the draft that you want to respond to that are different from your original feedback, you can do that. We'll hold an additional information session so that any questions can be asked about the changes that are in draft 2. And then we'll prepare a final draft after the board has had their public hearing on November 10th. As I mentioned, we've just found out that this November 15th date has actually been pushed to November 16th. The entire board meeting has shifted, so we'll get some communications out about that, but I literally just heard about that today. So we'll get that updated in future presentations. And of course, this is our presentation for today. So that's where we are in terms of where I would normally at this stage say, hey, if anybody would like to join us, please come to one of our future sessions. But in this case, I would just simply say, if you have friends, colleagues, neighbors, community members that you think could, really benefit from listening to this session, encourage them to go to our website and watch the recordings. And finally, we're at the point where we're kind of turning it over to you. I'll turn it over to our host, Corali, to kind of help guide me through what types of questions have come in so far, as well as to encourage you that if you do have any questions specific to this area, we're going to take those questions first. But if you have questions about other areas in the county, please post those as well, and we'll get to those toward the end of the session.
You have a lot of questions. First one, can any student be grandfathered to remain at their current school through the exit grade of their school?
Had to take a sip of water, sorry. Essentially, yes. The word that we're using now is stability, but that is a term that probably we've used in the district in the past was grandfathering. So grandfathering and stability mean the same thing. We're just changing over our terminology to stability. So yes, if you have an existing student attending one of the schools impacted and you put in that stability transfer, it will be approved and it will be valid through the end grade of that school. So asking about high school, yes, if I put in for my rising 10th grader, it would be valid through the end of 12th grade.
Will rising seniors be guaranteed the transfer waiver?
So I'm not going to use the word waiver because it's not a waiver. I'm going to use the word transfer. All of our rising seniors will have that approved transfer, as will our rising juniors and sophomores. So in this particular area, I feel like we're getting a lot of questions about the high school. So if your student is attending Apex High School or Apex Friendship High School and is being impacted by the recommendations, you put in that stability transfer following those directions. It's guaranteed to be approved and they'll be able to stay through the 12th grade.
Okay. Our community is off Holt and Old Jenkins Road. My kids currently go to Apex and are being reassigned to Green Hope. Green Level and Apex High are closer to my house. Green Hope is the furthest. This seems like an error. Could they have meant Green Level?
I appreciate that question. And what that addresses is, for those of you that got to see the video at the beginning, we say that proximity is important to us, and it is, but we have to be cautious that I can't always assign our families to the closest school. So for some context, if you've lived in a different district before or a different county before, there are some communities where if a developer puts together a particular development that has X number of houses in it, then they're required to set aside some land for a school. And then the district can use that to offset all those new students that are coming in. Our county does not have any such rules. Our municipalities don't have any such rules. So what happens is when developers come forward and get approved plans for their development, there's not necessarily land set aside for schools so that the schools can be really proximate to those developments. Our real estate division does a really great job of trying to find property wherever they possibly can. We also take projections 10 and 20 years into the future and start looking at sites well in advance of developments that we're aware of. But it's not always possible for us to assign families to their closest school. So in this case, it is not an error. Green Level is already experiencing its own form of rapid growth. It's already fairly close to full capacity, and there's continued development in its base attendance area, so it can't support additional base attendance areas. Green Hope High School does have excess capacity at its school site. Most of its attendance area is not experiencing rapid growth, so it does have the ability over a long period to be able to sustain this particular assignment recommendation.
Why move students from Apex Friendship when a new school is opening in Holly Springs in 2025? Students move now may have to move again. Why not just leave them until Felton Grove opens?
Thank you for asking that question because I don't know that it's always obvious. And I'm going to go back to the map. So if I'm making you dizzy, I apologize. Looking at the potential location of Felton Grove and recognizing that just to the south of it is the Holly Springs High School based attendance area, which is also getting pretty close to that same type of crowding that we're seeing at Apex and Apex Friendship. The relief that's going to be needed from Apex High School, Apex Friendship High School, and Holly Springs High School in general will most likely do a pretty good job of filling the school up. So we know that even if we take out, let's just say, and this is just for discussion points because obviously the board isn't considering this year, this portion of the Apex Friendship High School attendance area being assigned to Felton Grove. There is still such tremendous growth happening in this portion of the Apex Friendship base that our projections are that that won't be a sufficient amount of relief for the school. And so we need to go ahead and provide a little bit of additional relief to Apex Friendship High School because there's going, Green Levels over in this area and Apex Friendship is here. There's no new high schools coming in this area. So we do need to start making some adjustments so that we can have a long-term stable assignment plan in the future. I know that there's change now, but the idea is that this would be a long-term solution that will support the growth in the continued growth in the Apex Friendship base, as well as that shift into the Apex area to help use that capacity now that we've relieved it by those recommendations into Green Hope and Cary.
Okay. Can kids stay in a school that is capped?
Yes, and that's, I know, a very nuanced question for those of you who've been in the district for several years, because in this particular case, there are no new schools opening. We are making the very unique recommendation that even if the school is capped, if the student is already attending the school, we're going to let them remain through the 12th grade. So Apex Friendship High School would be in that situation. What that does mean, though, is that new families moving into the area, into one of those base attendance areas, they would then need to go to the changed or new school assignment.
2 kids currently at Apex High in 9th and 11th grade, third child in 7th. Will child number 3 be forced to attend a different high school than siblings or also eligible to transfer?
I'm so glad you asked that question because there is a distinction in our transfer process between stability rules and general transfer rules. So during an assignment proposal period, there are stability rules that are specific to the fact that we're making an assignment change. And so we want to capture those requests really early on and get those families into whatever school assignment they want, either the new school assignment with the transportation or stay where they are without transportation. A couple of years down the road, that seventh grader will actually fall not into the stability rules anymore, but into just the general transfer policy rules. And our general transfer policy rules always say that if there's an existing student at a particular school and they want to join their older sibling, we can approve that. So as long as one of those older siblings is still attending Apex High School by the time the seventh grader gets there, which should be the case with the ninth grader, then that sibling transfer would come in. But instead of asking for it during the stability time, because again, that's specific to a current assignment plan, you'd be asking for it in the normal transfer window, usually late February, early March. And again, that would be approved per policy.
Why was Green Level High School not included in the assessment of moving Apex High students to Green Hope High?
And I think I addressed that with one of the earlier questions, but just to reiterate, Green Level is already getting pretty close to 100% full itself, and it has continued growth and in its development in its attendance area. So we knew that if we made any recommendations into Green Level, they'd have to come right back out in a couple of years, and that is not what we're trying to do.
Why are overflow students from Apex Friendship not being moved to Green Level? Curious why Green Level wasn't in the plan rather than moving Apex Friendship to Apex and Apex to Green Hope. I have to
Again,
figure out the acronyms for the schools.
yes. So again, I think it's essentially the same question, and I can answer it kind of on both sides of the attendance area. I've heard questions like, hey, if we live here, why don't we go to Green Level as overflow? Or if we live here, why don't we go to Holly Springs as overflow? Because again, Holly Springs and Green Level are already full. We already had a relationship established with Apex High School as the overflow. And so it's a capping in itself isn't sustainable. So it is something we're trying to move away from. And with the opening of Felton Grove and the assignment changes that'll be made when that school opens, we're feeling pretty confident we'll be able to take that cap off at Apex Friendship. But the reason for right now, while they're not being assigned to Green Level or Holly Springs, is because of the crowding those two schools are already experiencing and the growth they have in their base attendance areas as well.
Is there really a guarantee for the stability waiver?
Yes.
But
And it's
I
not a
have
waiver, it's a
doubts.
transfer, but yes.
Okay.
Because you're not asking for a waiver of any policy. What's going to happen is when the assignment plan is approved and the stability rules that support the assignment plan are approved, that's essentially the policy for the year. So there's no waiver needed. It's simply a matter of just putting in the request so that we know it's what you want, because we certainly don't want to assign anybody. I did see some questions, and I'll kind of deviate for a second. I did see some questions come up in the thought exchange about why don't you just go ahead and approve everybody to transfer where they are? Because we do recognize there are families who either A, want to make the change, or B, need the transportation that comes with their new base school. And so we don't want to assume anything on either side of that question. And so we're simply just going to say, hey, if you put in the request, we're going to approve it. No problem. That's guaranteed. If you don't put in the request, we're going to presume that you want the new school. However, we're probably going to reach out to you one more time. So we're going to really work very hard to reach out to families directly that are impacted multiple times so that they have multiple opportunities to get that message that, hey, I need to take action if I want to stay where I am. We'll also be working with the principals as well to make sure it gets into their messaging too.
Where is the equity for existing high school students that have existing relationships and programs they attend and cannot provide their own transportation?
It's a very real challenge. And unfortunately, with our current transportation situation and the challenges that we have with our existing routes, the ability to continue to offer transportation to schools that are no longer the base assignment for the area is just something the district is not going to be able to do going into next year. We're bringing that question forward. We've heard it in multiple sessions, and so we'll certainly make sure it's fully discussed and vetted. I just don't want to overpromise. that is a challenge in this particular case because we can't offer any transportation to families that are staying at their assigned school or at their previously assigned school.
Is there a map of which areas will go to Felton Grove?
So right now there's not a specific map because it's not in this year's assignment plan. However, there is an impact area map. I'm not sure how to get there quickly without making everybody dizzy. Let me see if I can stop sharing for a moment. I'll pull it up on. Sorry for the pause. Is there another question I can answer while I'm looking it up?
Yes, let me look. A lot of stability questions. Again, Susan, to clarify, no younger siblings are grandfathered into the current base school of their older sibling if they're not starting school next year. I currently have a 9th, 7th, and 5th grader, so I have to send my kids to separate high schools.
I think we addressed that earlier. The short answer is no, you won't necessarily have to do that. It's just there's two different time periods for requesting transfers. So when we're talking specifically about changes that are coming about as a result of a current assignment plan, then we want to use that stability transfer period. It's really an accommodation to try to advance and accelerate those families being able to get that stability in place, to be able to, and I think the word I was going to say the participant used as grandfather. So it's the same concept, grandfathering, stability, they mean the same thing. We're just switching our terminology. So when you put in that request for transfer for stability in this sort of late December time period, that's specifically because you're being impacted right now by an assignment plan that's going to take effect in the 23-24 school year. As future years go on, we always have our normal traditional official transfer window that's generally towards the end of February into the beginning of March. And as part of that process, there's a general regular rule that says if there's an existing student at a school and you want the younger student to join them at 9th grade, or in the case of other grade levels, 6th or kindergarten, put in that transfer, we can approve that as long as you put it in during that specific window. So it's just slightly different categories. The stability transfer and the rules apply to just that coming year, that 23-24 school year. Moving forward, as your families are impacted because you've got younger students that are going to eventually rise up into that grade, then you would just use the more traditional normal transfer window and the regular transfer rules would apply.
Do you want me to ask you one more?
Actually, I've got the map.
Okay.
Now I just have to remember how to share. I've lost my share button. Sorry, everyone.
Okay.
So I'm going to navigate you here so you can find it on your own. But basically, when you get to the Wake County Public School site and you look for the enrollment section and you get to the future schools section, there's an area here that talks about future schools. We need to update it a little bit because, actually, it's fully updated. So if you look here, you can see the Felton Grove High School impact map. And what this is basically the idea that, hey, if you live in any of these areas, you should pay attention to public engagement activities. You should participate in the public information process. As you can see, it's a very expansive area. So we haven't set up a specific attendance area recommendation at this time. We just know that families in these areas are potentially impacted. As you can see, some of these areas are already being impacted by the 23-24 proposal in advance of the opening of the school to go ahead and take advantage of the fact that there's existing schools with existing capacity. So this gives you an idea of where the physical location of the school is, as well as all the areas where we'll be having some community engagement and reaching out to families to say, hey, let's have some talks about how we're going to open this school. So to take you back, if you, whoops, I think I just lost it. But if you look up WCPSS future maps, or is it future maps or future schools?
Future schools.
Future schools. You should probably be able to get to it quickly on your own as well.
If facility utilization is a priority, what is the rationale for keeping under-enrolled year-round schools on the year-round calendar? Why not change them to traditional?
Oh, that's a fabulous question. So that is a separate conversation that we usually have after the assignment plan has been approved. Last year, I think it was maybe in the February time period, where we took recommendations to the board to say, okay, in these particular areas, development is built out. There's no continued growth coming. The schools are a little bit underutilized. Can we switch them at least to a track 4, single track, track 4, while we kind of keep an eye on what's happening in these communities to see if they're going to need that extra capacity. So what we do first is we start with anything that's a reassignment, and then we see what gets approved there. Once we know officially what's been approved, then we start looking at those types of recommendations. So you may see some of those types of recommendations being made in the February, March timeframe for consideration as well. They're just looked at separately from the assignment plan because they're sort of dependent on whether or not these assignment recommendations get approved.
Could the stability rules change in the final plan?
I have received no feedback from anyone saying that they want them to be less than they are. So as staff, we will continue to recommend the stability rules as presented, as you can see here, and I don't foresee any recommendations to change them.
Two questions about when do we apply to remain at our school? When will we receive information about the stability transfer?
Sure. So we're going to do a couple of things. One, October 18th, after draft 2 is presented, we'll reach out to families that are included in that draft, right? So still included. And there's a high likelihood that these high school type questions that we're asking would still be included. So we'll start reaching out to those families to say, okay, if you haven't looked yet, please look. Your area is impacted. Your students being recommended, your address is being recommended to be reassigned. And here's a thought exchange, that type of public engagement information. And here's a public information session that's coming, all that stuff. And then I can't tell you just yet right now, because like I said, I'm still working with my technical team, but we'll put any technical details we have in terms of the window for when you'll be able to put in that request. I can tell you that it'll happen before January, the window will open. I really wanted to open in November so that you can just get in there, get that request in and take care of it. But I'm not sure that my technology is moving as fast as my wishes are. But I know for sure at some time in December that will open. So what will happen is we'll just be in continuous contact with you using our messenger systems and all of our appropriate communication tools. And we'll also make sure all of your principals are aware of when the windows are opening so that they can share that with you as well. But it'll be an online, I guess I can clarify that. It will be an online process. You'll go online, you'll put in your students' information. The system will verify that your student's impacted by the change. And then you'll just say, yes, I want the stability transfer. And we're also working to make sure that you can add in your rising 9th grade student or your rising kindergarten or 6th grade student at that time as well. So you don't have to wait and ask for them later.
Is there a place to find the current percentage of SMS, I'm assuming is Salem Middle, students that attend Green Hope High School and Apex High School?
If you want to go ahead and drop my email into the chat, if you will email me that question, I can respond to you on that, and then we can share it maybe as an FAQ if needed. It's off the top of my head. I can't give it to you, but I know there is a large cohort that does go from Salem Middle to Green Hope High School, and this would expand that cohort and make it a larger group.
Okay.
Also, if you have specific questions about your individual student, you are more than welcome. You think your family situation is a little bit complex, or you kind of want to just really verify that piece about that younger sibling, please feel free to send me an email. I just ask that if you're really giving me a comment about the plan, that you also include that in the thought exchange. But if it's personal and private about your family, by all means, let's do that offline. Keep your information confidential.
What will the traditional calendar option for Salem Middle be?
If you'll look at the address lookup tool, because it's going to be address by address. So if you'll type your address into the address lookup tool, it will tell you what that recommendation is.
And the address lookup tool is under wcpss.net/2023 enrollment proposal. And I can drop it in the chat.
I forgot about that. Thank you.
Why do we not see green level high school data?
It's just not impacted by the plan, so it's not presented. Usually when we're talking about the assignment plan, we only share information about the schools that are being recommended. At some point later the fall, maybe early spring, we'll talk about facility utilization rates across the district. And I believe those come through the facilities committee of the board. I don't have my numbers in front of me right now, but I can tell you they're pretty much at capacity right now.
What is the likelihood of Apex residents will be able to stay at Apex High School? Our kids live, play, and work in Apex, not Cary.
And again, I think this goes back to the earlier conversation about how developments work and about how land purchases work. As much as we would love for everyone to go to either their closest school or a school that's attached to their city or town's name, we are a county system and we have to balance all of the needs and including the growth. I know that the growth in the Apex area in particular has been booming and it's been coming without the necessary sort of lead up for us. By way of example, the town of Apex is really good about reaching out to us and letting us know when they're projecting a development and they say, hey, do your schools have enough capacity to support the potential new residents here? And we say no, and they approve it anyway. And that's not to be stinky or anything like that. It's just a reality that the development needs for the community are just outpacing the school bond processes and the ability to get new schools open. And so we're having as a county to utilize the capacity that we do have as efficiently as we possibly can, while also trying to be mindful of having consistent transportation routes. And sometimes a longer route is actually more efficient if a bunch of students get on it. So it's a lot of things to balance. It's not always perfect. I often say that when the district's goals and the district's policies and the individual families' goals and needs and wants match, it's a wonderful thing. And when they don't match, it's just a difficult balance. And as a district, we do have to be good stewards of our resources and try to use the facilities that we do have as best we can.
Why can't the overflowing schools be sent to the schools that are less crowded instead of taking kids from Apex Friendship and moving them to Apex High and moving those kids to Green Hope?
Hopefully I iterated this earlier. The capture overflow students are, while a current concern, they're not a long-term concern. We have some long-term concerns about the growth and the development in this area that cannot be sustained with the existing attendance areas. So over time, as you saw with the impact map, these recommendations would be coming anyway. And since the capacity is where it's at today, the fullness, the over enrollment is at a state where it's at today, where it's getting to a point where it's unsustainable for both schools. Um, our recommendation is to go ahead and make these moves in advance of the opening of Felton Grove so that once that school opens, the full complement of moves will be taken into consideration and in place. And ideally, all of the schools in the region will finally be at their sort of best fit size.
Given the need to provide relief at both Apex high schools, why is there still an area in Raleigh, far east of this map, where students are being bused over to Apex?
And so thank you for that question. If you'll recall, one of the main pillars of our student assignment policy is student achievement. And part of that is to make sure that we address areas of I get the wording wrong. We don't want to have schools that have high concentrations of low socioeconomic students or low performing students as part of that policy. So in this particular assignment plan, to continue to meet those student achievement goals, it is not appropriate to make a recommendation for that area at this time. It's certainly an area that we're continuing to monitor because we do understand the proximity piece. But at this time, it wouldn't support the student achievement goals of the district. To move that particular area.
What happens when the majority of students stay at their current schools and new students are moved in? How does that help capacity?
So those new students that move in to those areas that have been reassigned would then go to the new schools. So if an existing family, let's say, is assigned from Apex to Green Hope, but they choose to stay at Apex, then any new families that move into that same neighborhood would be assigned to Green Hope. And so we'll see a nice a pace of over time relief on all sides. So just remember, we're trying to address the parent concerns about stability while also trying to go ahead and make some early moves that provide some relief from a capacity perspective. And so it is our recommendation that we do a both and to provide that stability for families while also acknowledging that any new families that come in would be assigned to the base school for the address as approved.
We are within walking distance of Apex High. This proposal is sending us to Green Hope. My child is currently a 7th grader. Can we apply to Apex High even though we don't qualify for stability?
So that's a great question. As I mentioned, there's two separate sets of transfers. So that would fall into the general transfer request, and that would happen in that February to March time period every year. I cannot guarantee that we'd be able to approve that. Everything would be dependent on what type of relief was being offered by Felton Grove. So I have to stop short of saying, yes, of course we can approve that. I can't say that, but I can say it would be taken into consideration, and we would always advise families to list their specific concerns and needs so that we can make the best decision possible that aligns with policy as well as the current crowding status of the school.
With regular transfer requests during normal times for sibling transfers, are they guaranteed?
So if that's a future question, yes, right? So if there's a rising eighth grade student that's not quite old enough to fit into the stability rules this year, and then in the 24-25 school year, you'd be needing to make that request, then yes, that student would be able to join their older sibling during that time period. So it's best to use the stability process for the going into 23-24 school year. And then again, as you're going into future school years, our general transfer policy already gives staff the sort of the authority to approve a rising K6 or 9 sibling to join their older student at their school, as long as it's put in during that official transfer window.
My child is at Apex Middle as traditional calendar option. All students at Apex Middle will go to Apex High or Apex Friendship. This new plan has him going to Green Hope without any of those students from middle school. How does it make sense if this is his calendar option?
And that's a very important point to bring up, that when families do make those choices to go to a school that isn't the base assigned school, the feeder patterns are not always aligned in that way. However, the students in your neighborhood and in your community would be assigned to Green Hope High School, and it's not perfect, but it's what we can do right now with the facility utilization rates that we have today. But that can happen throughout the district. It's no different than if you ask for a magnet seat and then want to come back to your base assigned high school, you may or may not be with a cohort of friends. That can happen when you choose something other than the base school.
Why not shift students bus from Raleigh to Apex High over Green Hope High?
I feel like we've addressed that question, but again, that doesn't meet the student achievement goals in our current board policy related to student assignment. And so at this time, we're not considering that particular move. We are keeping an eye on that particular attendance area in the future, as we are with any attendance areas that are not proximate to schools. But remember, our proximity is one of the pillars, but it is not no pillar other than perhaps student achievement is more important than the others. We always have to find that right balance between those.
Let us know if you have any final questions.
Again, thank you so much for all of this rich series of questions and this sort of reiteration of similar concepts. I think sometimes asking the question in slightly different ways really helps to make sure that we fully understand the information. We will use a lot of the questions that came from today to enhance our FAQ, to make sure that we have some good solid responses out there, so that as you continue to look at our frequently asked questions section of the proposal page, you'll see those updates based on these virtual sessions, as well as anything else that's coming in through the thought exchange.
Two of these questions, but they're the same. Any relief coming for Apex Friendship Middle School? It is also capped.
Right. So looking at the middle school, there was not a specific new middle school coming in that particular area that could, sort of spur a particular assignment recommendation at Apex Middle. Glenn, are you still on the call?
Couldn't figure out the mute button. Yes, I am.
The question was related to not seeing any recommendations for Apex Middle School at this time, also recognizing that it's capped, or sorry, Apex Friendship Middle, recognizing that it's capped similar to Apex Friendship High School. I know you've got some more insight in that area that's not included in this assignment proposal. I didn't know if you wanted to talk to that question.
Sure. So while we do not have any particular new schools opening in the capital improvement plan at this time, we do have some capacity at some neighboring schools that we'll be looking at over time. I think part of the recommendations that we have right now aligned school calendars at middle school. I think we're going to need to have a larger district-wide conversation with regards to middle schools, because as I stated during the initial plan presentation to the board, we do have a surplus of middle school seats, not in this particular area, but further east and southeast. So we'll look to utilize some of those seats to provide relief to the growing Apex Friendship area.
Any last questions?
Just as a reminder, the thought exchange is going to remain open through tomorrow night, I think 11:59 p.m. One of our favorite times that we learned during COVID for those of you that have high schoolers that took Canvas courses. So the thought exchange will remain open through tonight into tomorrow and then through tomorrow night. And then at that point, we will close it simply so that we can start analyzing properly all of the information that's been put forward, and so that we can prepare that for our presentation to the board on October 18th. So please, if you think of anything after tonight's session or into tomorrow that you'd like to have added, please include that in the thought exchange. You won't necessarily need to use #session4. You're welcome to if you'd like. We just used that tonight to make sure we could capture any live questions that were coming in through the thought exchange. Please know that if you put a question into the chat or a comment into the chat, that's not necessarily part of this official record that's going to come through the thought exchange. So do please consider adding that to the thought exchange if it's not already there. Maybe you've already posted it there in a previous time, just to make sure we have the most comprehensive and complete set of information to share with our board in terms of parent feedback.
Families affected by Apex Friendship High School change are not happy for their students. Will this plan change, or do we have to have a local public meeting or public comment?
So hearing that information, we'll certainly take it under consideration, and we will share that with the board as we're making our presentations during draft 2. If you see something in draft 2 that you're still have concerns about, please add those comments and feedback to the draft 2 thought exchange. There will be a public hearing for the board on November 10th. I think I shared that with you before. Let me see if I can get you that next step slide. Close your eyes, don't get dizzy. So here on November 10th, we do have a special public hearing. And the reason I say special is it's on a Thursday, so that it's specifically set apart from the traditional board meeting, so that the public hearing is specific to the student assignment plan. So all of the comments that are being made will be directed specifically to the assignment plan. So if at any point you still would like to see some changes that maybe staff isn't recommending, you're welcome to share those throughout the process. And those will all be taken under consideration before final decisions are made.
Will this presentation be posted for online viewing?
So this is a subset of the full presentation that was prepared for the September 20th board work session. So that's the session we're sort of referring everyone back to, because it has the complete set of recommendations for the entire county. So if you'll look it's posted with the board materials and to the board materials section of our website. And I think we have a link to it or something like that on the proposal website as well. In addition, there's sort of in Word form, a portion of the proposal that's included on the proposal website. So this specific one, as I said, is just a smaller version of that larger presentation. So we do refer everyone back to the larger presentation because it's more complete. The larger presentation also has individual maps toward the end that you can zoom in and look at, so you can get a clearer understanding of which areas are impacted. And so again, that's another reason why I'd refer you to that more comprehensive September 20th presentation, because it has more complete information. Again, I thank you so much. These questions are extremely helpful in guiding our response to what was posted for draft 1. They will certainly help staff to bring information back together with the planning team to figure out what types of recommendations we would like to make in terms of revisions for draft 2. We will also be sharing summaries of all of these conversations with the board on October 18th, so that they can understand the types of comments that have come in from these information sessions, as well as through the general thought exchange. So we really do appreciate you giving up some of your time on this Thursday evening to be with us and to share your concerns, questions, to hear our explanations. And while I do understand that not everything is exactly as how everyone would prefer it to be, hopefully you understand why the recommendations are being made and what data elements were used to make the recommendations. At this time, I don't know that we have any additional questions. I'll defer to my host.
That's right. Thank you all for attending.
Thank you again so much and have a good evening.